So, here we are. The election happened. The eternal hangover is now upon us.
Year zero of the Trump era.
The great darkness, the winter has arrived. And all I can say is, I lost faith until the very last moment. Until a couple weeks before the vote, I thought Trump was going to win. And then...
I felt the same, because I kept listening to Nate Silverman whisper into my ear that everything was going to be fine.
His honeyed words.
Yeah, and I actually went to the 538.org election forecast every single day just to make sure that things were still statistically likely to be...
I'll admit, I spent way too much time on that website and fiddling around with different states and seeing what could plausibly happen and going, well, the polls put it at a 75% chance. And yes, the polls have been pretty damn wrong this year on a bunch of things.
Yeah.
Delusions have reigned throughout the world in 2016. But I figured, fuck it. I don't want to see Trump be president, so fuck it. I hope he won't win.
I always had the sinking feeling in my stomach though that he I always kind of figured he was going to win despite all odds, because 2016 has been the year of unprecedented fucking shit happening, like Brexit and the Syrian refugee crisis and all sorts of things.
Yep. If there's an earthquake that's going to happen, if there's some priceless antique that will just fall off a shelf and be destroyed, this was the year for it.
Yeah. This has been the shittiest fucking year. When when we watched the election results come in together, it was just I felt like they were literally scenes out of a plausible nightmare, seeing actual TV news anchors announcing
those words coming out of their mouth.
Yeah.
Although they tried as hard as they could not to say it. I avoided the news the day of,
Oh, I know
let's
you
just
did.
call it the event.
The event.
What happened? What shall not be spoken of? I avoided it, and literally I walked in the door to see the TV with news on it, and as soon as I saw the numbers that were coming in, and it was super early, I was like, oh fuck, he's gonna win. I mean, it's consistently in his favor.
Yeah.
The states that he needed to get, he was gonna get them all, and he did, and a little bit better.
Okay, can I just take this opportunity to say fuck you, Florida? Fuck you 1,000 times. I will never forgive you for this ever. I just want to say that on record. Fucking Florida.
There's a lot of parts of the world, a lot of places, a lot of things. But yeah, Florida's a solid choice. If there had to be one particular state, I'd say they are the ones that, you know what, fuck them. They're gonna be one of the first people to get swallowed up in the coming global apocalypse. The oceans will rise, and that entire state will just sink below the waves. So they'll get theirs, is what I'm saying.
In the long run.
Yeah.
And it'll be partially the responsibility of Trump, who they helped,
Well, they helped. I mean, there is more to it than just saying we hate Trump and that's the end of the story. Because let's face it, I hate Clinton too. And before the actual election had happened, my attitude was kind of like, I don't like either of them. I flippantly would have voted for one of the other and blah, 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 blah. But yeah, I definitely felt worse with this happening than I would have felt with Clinton happening.
Yeah, well, of course. I think...
I just didn't... I was just I don't know, they're cut from the same, political cloth in the sense that what they are going to do will be mostly indistinguishable.
Well, we have no idea what Trump is actually going to do. This is a man who is more thin-skinned than anyone I've ever even... he is cartoonishly thin-skinned.
But he's also cartoonishly unprincipled.
What does that matter?
Well, it means he'll make deals with people. He'll make deals with people who insult him. He'll give people jobs that, other presidents would have said, well, you burned those bridges. You called me a monster or a bigot or a total and utter disaster for America. So obviously I'm not going to make you the secretary of whatever.
Yeah.
But Trump is both extremely thin-skinned, but also unprincipled. He doesn't seem to actually care what people say about him.
Well, yeah, he's a businessman. There's no grudges in business.
This is where things get a bit weird, because he's no longer in business.
Well, he is. He still owns... In fact, some people are saying that just him being president and owning his whatever the fuck it is a conflict of interest in and of itself. And
sure.
It is.
Well, yeah, but to be fair to Trump and I don't really feel I
You
need
just
to point,
said those words.
I don't think I need to point out that I'm not a fair person when it comes to Trump generally. But to be fair to him, the principle of duplicity, of conflicts of interest in government has basically been a well-established fact forever, really. I mean, it's even the most honest presidents, let's say, or prime ministers or whoever, when they retire, they get hired out to do $200,000 talks to all the people they helped out in government. That's a conflict of interest, but that's par for the course. That's what you do.
Yeah.
That's your retirement. That's your reward for a lifetime of public service.
Yeah.
As it were. And so for Trump to simply cut out the middleman and make himself the billionaire person bribing himself is almost, to me at least, like of almost no consequence.
It's almost like it's meant to be.
Yeah, he has simplified government. That's one layer of the bureaucracy he's done away with. Bribery doesn't need to actually happen now. It can happen inside his own mind and done immediately.
Fucking shit. The people that he's appointing to the secretary positions or like the cabinet positions are horrifying.
Yeah.
And I think
garbage, each and every one of them.
Not just garbage, but like pestilence, utter human waste, the worst, the scum of the earth.
And he's not even president yet.
I know. Fucking hell.
He'll probably undo a few of those choices and pick someone worse.
You can count on, if there's one thing that you can count on, knowing just from living through 2016, is that no matter how bad you think things are, they're gonna get fucking worse.
And there's still another month to go.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a real crummy Christmas, and I don't know how, but that's my prediction.
I just have that feeling. Yeah.
Something bad's gonna happen. The power will probably go out for like a week, and it'll be like middle of December, and just the power's out.
No heating.
Storm, hydro's out. I guess that's just what would happen this year. But I don't know. Getting to the substance of the matter, and not just malign and depressing complaints, because everybody complains about Trump. Everybody has been complaining about Trump for some time, and yet he still happened.
Here we are.
We are, right? So obviously that's not good enough. Whatever value comes, personally at least, for me, from complaining about the guy, something a little bit more substantive is, I think, needed. Not just from us, but from the media, certainly the Democratic Party, although I don't really have much hope or care for them.
I think that if there's one thing, like, I'm not sure if I entirely agree with Slavoj Žižek when he said that the good thing that would come of a Trump presidency is that it would be accelerationist, that it would cause necessary social developments to happen quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that he is partially correct in saying that, because if Hillary Clinton would have won, we would have all just sighed in relief and said, okay, we avoided the worst. I
don't know.
And I think that there would be no reason for people to be actively politically engaged. I
don't think that, like, say, the protests, although they haven't really done very much, I don't think the protests would be as large as they are now, the anti-Trump protests.
Right. But
if we want to talk about, like, when leftists or progressives or liberals or whatever, however big tent vague you want to make I'm not some pig-headed racist douchebag from some shithole town somewhere, and therefore I'm a smart, forward-thinking person.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of people went asleep when Obama was elected.
Yeah.
That was when things went black. Like the lights went out in people's minds for some time, and even now, where you can talk to people who, I mean, in our case, it's not like we're talking to a lot of people who actually voted for Obama, but when you point out things like, but what about the drone strikes and the persecution of journalists and the attacks on whistleblowers, and they're just like, well, I don't know. What about the fact he said he was going to close Guantanamo Bay? Well, politics is a rough game, and you gotta swings and roundabouts and compromise.
If there's one thing, and I have to say that this whole election and Barack Obama's presidency together made me see the amount of rationalizing that liberals do when faced with the realities of world events. Because if you take a look at just the whole process of Trump being elected. Like, liberals would always say, like, oh, well, he's crazy. He's never going to get elected. Oh, that's not going to happen. And then when he got the nomination, it was, oh, he couldn't possibly become president. You know, he's obscene. He's too unorthodox, whatever. And then he becomes president. And all of a sudden they're saying, oh, well, maybe it won't be so bad. Maybe we have to give him a chance first. Maybe, you know.
He deserves...
Every fucking step of the way they've rationalized.
What did Clinton say? He deserves an open mind. In her concession speech. And to be fair, her concession speech was fine and all that. I mean, I don't really have any complaints about someone who obviously was not at all prepared to give a concession speech. That seemed fairly clear. But the one line that really stuck out to me as like a massive what the fuck moment was that line of, he deserves an open mind. Because no, he doesn't. I mean, you might wish, you could go out there and say, I've said a lot of things about him, and he's not as bad as I've said he is, right? That's something you could say.
That's also untrue, though. He's worse.
Sure, but they said a lot of things about him that were just all over the place. But the point being, if you're Clinton and you're trying to get people to not be entrenchedly angry with the president, if you want to draw people out and say, we have to engage with him in order to sort of draw him over to our position... You could just say that. The idea that he deserves anything is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, I was actually fucking disgusted with how quickly the Democrats rolled over and just accepted defeat. And in exactly that way, like, oh, he deserves an open mind, we need a peaceful transition of power, we have to respect the new blah, blah, blah. Like, no, you're just throwing the entire movement under a bus.
Well, they did that already. Better people have thrown better movements under the bus already this year.
Okay, sure, but in terms of just even just my own personal anger at liberals, like just that concession speech that Hillary Clinton made was the perfect opportunity to energize the working class and energize the political movements. Okay, not working class.
No, I don't disagree with that, actually.
It was a perfect time for her to energize the movement and get people more active, and they just fucking surrendered. Like it was just...
Sure, if it were me, if I was on that stage and I had to give a consistent speech to someone like Donald Trump, I would have said, okay, here's the deal. He's promised a lot of good things, and we need to hold him to that. The good stuff, right? He's promised jobs. He's promised a better deal for America. I've never believed that was actually what he was fighting for, but we need to hold him to that. And that's what Democrats need to do now.
Right.
Hold him to the good shit. We can still criticize him over all the racist bullshit, but that's a way of drawing the working class back to the Democratic Party.
Right.
But, I mean, what I was kind of chuckling about was just the fact that, yeah, you're right, she could have given something like that. She could have given a speech like that. But she could have given a speech like that any time in the last year and a half. She could have said any number of things. The Clinton campaign could have gone, well, a lot of people are mad at us, and you're sort of the embodiment of their anger, so we need to do something about that. No, their whole campaign was basically, what are you talking about? We have the establishment candidate. We have the respectability. We're the good choice. He's crazy. Not just racist, not just bigoted, but untested. Not one of us was the big thing the Democrats kept harping on. Yeah. He's not a politician, for fuck's sakes. He's a TV celebrity, a businessman, a guy out of touch with Washington, D.C. And every time they said that, every time they alluded to that, it was like, really? Oh, good. That's great. Because that's exactly the kind of person we don't want to be president.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. I think one of the major problems for Clinton, and this is why I would say that the Democrats weren't they weren't the losers in this campaign, in the sense that, I mean, the election was hers to lose in the sense that she was the establishment campaign. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, it was exactly the features that they thought were their best features. That was exactly the reason why they lost.
Yeah, it was their fatal flaw. Because this wasn't just another election. The circumstances were completely different. I think that the Trump presidency is kind of like the result of the consequence in the long term of the 2008 Great Recession, where and in conjunction with the fact that the Democratic Party turned their back on the working class of America fucking decades ago, and until now they've been able to say, oh well, who are you going to vote for, the crazy Republicans?
Yeah,
oh yeah, they
do.
don't represent you, they don't support blah 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 blah. But this time,
You want to vote for McCain? He's like 100 years old.
Yeah,
You want to vote for Mitt Romney? He's a billionaire who doesn't understand you. And now they have a guy that's literally the embodiment of both of those problems.
but in this case, I think that working class Americans, even though Hillary Clinton did technically win the popular vote by like 2 million votes or something, but nevertheless, great swaths of the American working class saw something in Trump that was different, and you have like middle class America is falling apart at the seams. They have no, I mean, in Canada we pay taxes and we get like healthcare, for fuck's sake, and in America they pay taxes and they get wars and austerity.
Well, we get both wars and austerity too, but at least we do have healthcare, and at least in principle there's a sort of a sense that the average person in Canada at least could just sort of easily identify where their money goes. Like they could say, well, where do my taxes go? Well, healthcare, education, and then probably a bunch of other
security,
stuff, right? And then, of course, everything else, however that works. And in fact, in reality, that is like the two big things. Education and healthcare are the two biggest portions of the budget. Now, in the case of the United States, it is a tough sell to sell America to even Americans these days. It's hard to argue why anyone should care. Even in this election, if anything, it was...
Care about what? What do you mean?
Well, care about America, care about any of this stuff. Like, well, care about who becomes president. Because what does it matter? Well, not a whole lot. Where does the money go? Fuck knows. There's this mysteriously massive amount of debt, but it doesn't seem to matter. Interest rates might go up or down, but no one really seems to know why. The economy is, well, you hear in the news it's doing better or worse, but I never feel any different. Jobs are still shitty. You have a paycheck, but whatever. It's not like there's any clear correspondence between what people are actually experiencing and what they're being constantly told. And so there has been this building hatred and distrust of the media, of the government, and that won't go away with Trump, but he has sort of was puked up by all that.
Yeah, he rode that wave. I think that the fact that the Democratic Party for the last 30 years has been pushing through anti-worker trade deals, has been allowing the outsourcing of jobs to, third world countries and developing countries, all the fucking shit that Trump was railing on about during his entire campaign about,
NAFTA, for fuck's sakes.
Yeah.
That was the most bizarre fucking part of this election, when Hillary Clinton was on stage and arguing that she was against NAFTA from the beginning, originally.
She said that?
Yep, and Trump was in favor of it, originally. She was saying, I was against it, and I tried to make...
But her husband signed the deal.
Yeah, sure, but they're not literally joined at the hip. She does have her own opinions, after all. But at the same time, the argument basically was... the argument she made seemed to be something along the lines of, I was against it, and apparently she wrote some article against NAFTA. I have no fucking idea, and that kind of shit just doesn't really matter one way or the other. But ultimately, she wasn't defending NAFTA because she thought it was a good idea. She was defending it, I think, for purely political reasons, because she wanted to try to diffuse Trump's claim that he's going to abolish it.
Right.
So it was this bizarre situation in one of the debates where, as per usual, she's saying just total and utter garbage, and he's saying something insane, and people don't believe either of them. I'm going to abolish NAFTA, and Clinton says, well, my opponent's a liar, and he'll never do that, and I'm the one who was originally against it, even though I'm in favor of it now, and I'm not going to get rid of it.
That's exactly the kind of predictable, scripted shit that turned people off about this whole process, And actually, I have to say, I don't want to say I told you so, not to you, but just in general, that I was making the case that these two candidates were so reviled by the American populace that voting turnout would go down, and when voting turnout goes down, it tends to benefit the Republicans, and it seems that's exactly what happened.
Sure. Although, at the same time, I mean, the one from a statistical standpoint, a downturn in voter turnout is actually not that unprecedented. Obama was the exception to that trend.
Right.
And that trend's been like a long time coming.
Yeah, that's true. It has been going down since like the 60s pretty steadily.
The really interesting thing about this election is that the incumbent president was so much more popular. Like, what usually happens is after 8 years or even 4 years, people are like, nope, not interested. This guy is garbage. We want a fresh voice, which is why you tend to... That's usually the argument behind why people will flip to the other party.
Right.
They wear out the Republicans, and they don't like them anymore. They go to the Democrats. Similar thing happens. You go back again. The two-party system sort of works on this principle of, we both do the same thing, but we both argue against each other, and who else are you going to choose? So you go with whichever one you feel is less likely to fuck you over, which will usually be whichever one has been ruling not as recently.
Yeah. And actually...
But this time, Obama's popular.
Yeah, and also, as you mentioned that, there was like a ton of people that voted for third parties in this election.
I was actually, of all the things I was surprised by, the voter turnout going down while the media the day of was desperately trying to pretend it had gone up just to play up their own...
ratings.
Well, not only their own ratings. I think many of the people in the media... I mean, the media was clearly pro-Clinton throughout this whole fucking campaign. Mm-hmm. And I think during the election day itself, they were just playing that up for their own sanity, essentially. Like, well, like you say, if turnout goes down, that generally favors Republicans, so they're going to just... every time there's a long line in front of a polling booth, that's going to be on the news, and we're going to have our guy there locally talk about it, because that'll make it feel like this isn't going to go the other way.
Okay, two things to say in response to that. One, I couldn't believe my eyes of how long those lineups were for voting, and it happens every election in America.
Sure.
And
they're still counting. For God's sakes,
Jesus Christ! It's a deliberate attempt at disenfranchising lower income communities, for sure, because all of the upper class and middle all of the well-to-do regions have plenty of polling stations, but in the poor regions, for some fucking reason, they always never have nearly enough voting machines, and people have to sit in line for like 4 hours. I mean, I've voted in almost every single municipal, provincial, and federal election in my lifetime that I've been eligible to vote for, and I have never had to wait longer than 15 minutes. Not once. There's ample staff. It's not like it's hard to organize. It's obviously a deliberate attempt at by, in most cases, Republican establishment figures to stifle minority.
It's not even money. I mean, most of those people I don't exactly know how it works in the States, but like most of the people here are basically just like volunteers, and happily so, It's like, why not, right? It's the election. It's democracy. This is what we're supposed to be promoting. So, all hands on deck. Let's get out there, and it's just for a day every 4 years anyway. So fuck it. It's not like it's a massive amount of your day or time or whatever. But in their case, yeah, it was long lines.
And two, if all of I don't want to be anti third party, because I think the United States does need a workers' movement and an actual socialist party, but in a lot of states, the number of people that voted for third parties was higher than the difference between Clinton and Trump votes.
Yes, although I will say a few things about that. As I said, the voter turnout going down wasn't really shocking to me. Like you said, I told you so kind of crap. I was surprised that the third party support was actually as low as it was.
Well, I don't know if it's higher or lower than other elections.
I don't care, but I am still, based on, well, you know what? I feel like the biggest fucking jackass right now to say this, but based upon the polls...
Go on.
They were going to get a lot more votes. So...
Well, this happens every time.
No,
people are, and when it comes down to it, they're like, I don't want the turd sandwich to win.
It's a protest vote, or at best, you could even argue I want to sway the Democratic or Republican Party more in the direction of the green or libertarian ideas. So when they look at the vote and they go, a couple million people voted for these ideas, we should give them a little something so that more people don't leave next election.
Yeah.
I mean, I get that, but like you were saying, that issue of the Green Party, for instance, getting more votes than the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans in Florida, for instance. Florida, the fuck off state, we'll call it. The problem was that in the case of the Libertarians and the Green Party, there was a fair amount of overlap between both parties. And this is, once again, it's all polls. So, polls are garbage. If there's one lesson from this, well, one of the many lessons from this year is polls are garbage. Yeah. Don't listen to polls. Whatever you do, go with your gut feeling. Apparently that seems to work somehow.
Yep.
But the exit polling of people who voted for the Green Party was somewhere in the range of, like, I can't remember the exact number, but basically the point being is that yes, if you were going to vote for someone else, you would be most of the people voting Green Party would be voting Democrat. A fair number of them would vote for the Republicans as well instead. Mm-hmm. The largest chunk said they wouldn't have voted for anyone at all. So you can look at that number of people in Florida who voted for the Green Party and say, if every one of them had voted for Clinton instead.
But in actual fact, they wouldn't have.
But yeah, that gets split down itself.
Well, we're getting into, like, the whole multiple universe theory at this point of, like, if
maybe
such and such would have happened.
But I do think there's a distinction here between, say, when George Bush won the first time, where a majority of Nader voters would have voted for Gore.
Right.
That actually was the case. If Nader hadn't have won, Gore probably would have won Florida, most likely, and therefore would have become president. And what an alternate universe that would have been. But given the Obama presidency, it kind of loses a lot of its luster when you realize that actually, yes, Democrats can wage just as bad wars as anyone else.
Yeah, but we're not talking about Democrats in this case. We're talking about Al Gore, and just the one issue of climate change would have satisfied me.
Maybe. This sort of dovetails back into Donald Trump a bit, but I am fairly convinced that the American machine, that the political machine that's there, the bureaucracy, would have just chewed him up. That, like, all of those good ideas would have come out the other side as just sausage.
Okay. So you think that Donald Trump isn't going to be a complete bull in China shop, that he's going to get chewed up through the bureaucracy into just another generic
I think that's the president. Most likely thing. I don't... Look, I'm not going to put it out there. I'm not going to, like, put out of my mind the idea that Donald Trump could, in fact, be a total and utter muppet, basically. Just fucking blah, 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 and just missiles start flying suddenly. Like, that could happen. But I think that the whole American political establishment is stronger than he is.
But, okay, I hate to regurgitate Democratic Party talking points.
Go ahead, comrade.
As a socialist, this makes me uncomfortable. But someone that can't be trusted with a Twitter account shouldn't be trusted with the nuclear codes, and that's just happened. So.
Yeah, well, okay, there's a few things about that. One, no one should be trusted with a Twitter account. Twitter exists to not be trustable. It's such a ridiculous example. It's like saying no one should be trusted with a Grindr account to become president. Well, I guess, but, at the end of the day, he's a normal person, right? And particularly when it came to Twitter, at least.
That's true.
He used Twitter like most people do to settle petty bullshit and basically aggrandize himself and criticize the people he doesn't like.
Yeah.
That's what it's used for. It was not a extension of a campaign machine just with someone else's name on it. Like Hillary Clinton had a Twitter account.
Yeah,
no one
and she quoted herself.
Yeah.
The person that wrote the tweets quoted Hillary Clinton and, like, wrote Hillary after it.
Yep. Because of that is exactly how we all knew it wasn't Clinton. It wasn't even a fanciful notion.
They didn't even have to give us any, like, proof.
No, it wasn't even confusing. It was so well understood what that Twitter account was and was for that even the facade was unnecessary. You're not hearing Clinton's thoughts. This is a paid staffer whose job it is, possibly among other things, but it's entirely possible this was their only job, to just write Twitter tweets in order to go after demographics. That person was probably actually had a pretty high pressure job. The focus was there. So when you come back to this whole question of, Donald Trump, the man who, is on Twitter at 3 a.m. Well, you know what? I will say to the Democrats and to that talking point, fuck you. I'm on the computer at 3 a.m. Fuck you. I'm sick of this shit. Why should people be ashamed of the fact that they're mad at a particular time of the day? Like somehow this is some kind of that being a politician or having an opinion is some kind of 9-to-5 operation.
Well, and I think that underscores the sort of disconnect that the Democrats have with common working people in America, where like they are the establishment, they are the elites that the working class people do.
Yeah, they have a job
hate.
that is from 9 to 5, and at 3 in the morning, they're in bed.
Yeah.
And you'd have to be a crazy person to be awake and online at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there is so much about the Hillary Clinton's campaign that is just the absolute stereotype of how Republican or just working class America views the elites, the liberal elites, you know, her fucking pantsuits, her fucking snobby attitude, her why am I even debating this idiot, can't I just be president already kind of attitude. And I think that was absolutely fatal for the Democratic Party. And Jesus fucking Christ, I have to say this, God damn it, if they had have nominated Bernie Sanders, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now.
Maybe.
If they had have not had their heads up their own asses so far that they couldn't see the very obvious anti-establishment and distrust for, you know, the common order of things, that Bernie Sanders would be president. Would Bernie Sanders have established full gay luxury space communism in the United States? No, he wouldn't have. But fuck me if it wouldn't be better if he had won. If he had won.
Oh, I completely agree with that. But I will point out something. I think that it's worth. We can talk about the campaign and the staffers in it having their heads up their ass. But when we're talking about Bernie Sanders, we're now talking not about a campaign staffer who thinks that they understand middle America but is so out of touch. We're now talking about the DNC. And I think that the DNC was more afraid of Bernie Sanders being president than they were of Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's
They were
possible.
clearly, because they promoted him back the summer before last summer. The whole WikiLeaks thing about Hillary Clinton's and the DNC's internal documents saying that they were actually trying to pump up Trump early on,
right?
Because he was a terrible candidate and could never win.
And
even though they knew, and even though they knew everything about him then, even though I mean, this is the thing. It's not simply that Donald Trump won and America went with him or anything like that. Hillary Clinton had everything on her side. The Democratic Party had everything on its side. As I said, it had a popular sitting president who was a Democrat. It had the media on its side. They spent more money. They had better staffers. They were better organized. I mean, for all that you can say that Trump had like a core group of people who knew what they were doing, and to some extent he did, and that does bear some significance since they obviously knew who to target and what regions of the country to actually advertise to. Mm-hmm. But Clinton's campaign didn't start 2 years ago. It didn't start 4 years ago. It didn't even start 8 years ago. Clinton has been running for president for the better part of a decade.
Yeah.
Preparing for this election.
Yeah.
And she lost.
And Donald Trump didn't even have paid staffers in a lot of states and, like, basically just winged it and had a bunch of incompetent people. And he was able to...
His own kids, who, I mean, you know, we can laugh at the fact that they're his kids and all that. But the main point being, they're not professionals. They don't have any particular abilities here.
No, and a lot of people that he's assigned to the cabinet positions are completely unexperienced in the fields that they're now leading the country on.
But maybe that's how this works. Maybe that is the effective way of going forward. I don't mean from the point of view as far as like what I would want to see, but I mean from the point of view of what does Trump know works? What has he experienced that he can now rely on to sort of guide his choices? It's that Americans don't want experience. They want someone who doesn't have experience, that someone who will do things or at least try to do things in the face of a system that is so, you know, ossified, paralyzed, that it can't do anything. And he might be right in that sense. Obviously, the establishment political process doesn't work. It's so deadlocked. It's so paralyzed.
Well, I mean, Jesus Christ. Congress hasn't passed a law in like 4 years except for some dumb bullshit about like minor
No,
other
it's
bullshit.
and the need for executive orders, the need to subvert democracy ultimately has just increased as this deadlock has gone on.
Yeah, and Barack Obama is enough of a spineless liberal that he's not willing to actually do that, whereas Trump has a fucking laundry list of executive orders that he's going to pass through on his first fucking day of office.
Or threaten. I mean, all he really has to do... I mean, this is the thing, is that you talk about spineless liberals. You don't think he could cobble enough Republicans and Democrats together to just say, you know me, I will make this an executive order, or you can pass the version of what I'm going to do that you would like more. And they'll just do that.
Well, I do just want to say this, that I do think that Donald Trump, to some extent, sort of hoodwinked the American population, because he was...
To some extent.
Well, he basically campaigned as being an anti-establishment person, and he is appointing the most extreme right-wing establishment figures that he could possibly find. The guy that the head of the EPA is against protecting the environment. The head of education doesn't believe in public education. The Secretary of Defense said that he wants to send 1 million people to fucking Guantanamo. It is a fucking nightmarish cabinet that he's cobbled together. I remember back in the Bush days, you're like, how could you find anybody worse than this man who can't string a fucking sentence together? And here we are, where we have even more extreme people running the government. And while I don't agree with everything that Professor Chomsky says, I do agree with him that the Republican Party of America is the most dangerous organization in the world. They, insofar as in their just for their climate change denial alone, makes them a threat to human civilization.
Okay, sure.
As we know.
However, I would say when it comes to climate denial, there are two kinds of it in the world today. There's the people like many of the appointees and arguably Trump himself. The other kind of climate denier or global warming type character is people like our current prime minister, who talk a very good game and legislate extremely well and appoint all the right people, and the results are still garbage. The one thing about Trump that I don't think is a good thing, but is one of the appealing points that gets overlooked a lot, is when people talk about him saying he says the truth. He says what he thinks, and he's not some mealy-mouthed liberal liar who will just deceive us and sell us a bill of goods. This is exactly the kind of point where that really does start to look really obvious. When you have Obama, the Obama presidency did very, very little in the effort of curtailing global warming.
Yeah.
And so if we're talking about this from the point of view of the planetary catastrophe, however big or small that might be, however bad it might get, or wherever you happen to fall on that line in kind of a predictive sense, the direction's the same. You could say, well, Trump's going to destroy the EPA, or he'll defund certain programs that are trying to help, turn away from this problem. But the Obama presidency did the same thing. They underfunded programs. They got rid of certain contingencies. They provided tax breaks to industries that pollute quite a bit. And the fact that Trump is honest about it is about the only thing anyone can get out of the government. You can either have them lie to you or tell the truth. Their actions seemingly will be the same.
As something of a tangent, that does remind me, and I think it's worth mentioning, that I really hate that the left wing, like ever since the Democrats and social democratic parties around the world have sort of slowly turned their backs on everyday working class people, the left wing has been associated with social movements and identity politics and that sort of thing, rather than, fighting for workers' rights and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I think that this is a Achilles heel for the left, because everyone is, Obama did all those things. He had a lot of the same policies as Bush. He furthered a lot of the policies that Bush did, but because he wasn't a racist Southerner, or he was, African American, and he was progressive on social issues to some extent, and so it's the whole capitalism with a human face thing, right?
He was charismatic in a way that Trump never will be.
No, yeah, of course. But I think that now, more than ever, it is of historical necessity that the left take up the flag of championing socialism and championing everyday working class people, and that's not to say that I think that the left should abandon social issues. Obviously, they're important. Working people of color and, homosexual working people have their own struggles that they have to face, and we need to support them in their unique struggles that they have. But the focus really needs to be on getting us all under one big tent and one left-wing, militant, labor-focused movement to fight the attacks that the Trump presidency is going to bring.
I agree. However, I would just say, sort of as an addendum to that, given the hypothetical nature of all of this. On the one hand, the identity politics stuff has been used as a way of getting votes more than anything else. The Democratic Party looks at minorities as a pool of votes that they have,
right,
and that they own, essentially. Those are our guys, and they'll vote for us, much like a lot of Republican insiders will look at, right-wing religious people in the United States as they're just ours and they have nowhere to go. So we can basically do whatever we want with them, and we will appeal to them in a pandering kind of way, condescending even. But ultimately, they're just there, and they'll vote for us. And I think that when it comes to an actual left-wing position, those other issues, the identity politics stuff, isn't just some icing on the top or whatever. It's they're also worse off and therefore also worth fighting for. It's to achieve that unity of the working class requires a fight for all those things.
Right.
That you can't just say, hey, let's all come together, and also we agree with you on all this other stuff that you want. It's those fights that you're fighting are our fights, not because we sympathize, but because if we don't all fight together, we lose.
An injury to one is an injury to all.
Yeah, basically that. It's not I think that sort of the more liberal attitude or the more identity politics directed attitude is in that notion of, these people are worse off, therefore we should help them. And my position on that is, well, I mean, sure, but that really is irrelevant when it comes to the fact that when those people, whoever they are hurt, we're all hurt as well. And therefore, it is in our interest to fight together. Whereas the liberal mentality is more like, well, my interest is my own and it really doesn't matter, but I feel guilty and therefore will, send a couple $100 to a charity I think will help.
Hopefully, Donald Trump forces groups on the left that traditionally haven't worked together to unite forces. And if there's one fatal flaw that the left wing has always had, it's that we're fucking fragmented. There's all sorts of different groups, there's all sorts of different interests and focus, whereas the right wing so much more easily than the left wing is able to unite. And they're able to have a united front against workers and against, minorities and whatever other group you want to put in there. But the left has never really been able to agree very well. And we're also not very well funded because we have to fund ourselves. So I think that if there's one good thing that will come of this, it's that the left will have to work together and will be forced to mobilize.
I don't know, man. I mean, politically, this is accelerationism, but plenty of people said the same thing in 2008 with the economic collapse. This will force us to organize in order to defend our interests, and the working class will be forced to work together. And as it turned out, what you got in the States was things like Occupy and a few other sort of vaguely effective, I guess, movements. Effective in the sense that they were well known. Even the problem I have with accelerationism isn't that the better is ever worse. An unintuitive argument I'm willing to sort of take seriously for a while, right? Trump is the worst candidate, and that's what makes him the better result. Is effectively the accelerationist argument. The problem, though, is that without the political organization, that mobilization against Trump could go the same way as Occupy. And without a coherent actual plan, and that is still completely lacking, that movement may end up doing exactly what, as you said, the left usually does, which is fight amongst itself. No matter and what's really obnoxious about that fighting amongst ourselves is that we tend to do it most often in the name of unity. We all need to work together to defeat Trump, which means uniting under what? You're the Democratic Party or not, and that's one big split already.
Yeah.
And then we say not. The Democratic Parties are all a bunch of fucking sellouts. Who cares? so we'll go with the non-democratic party. Well, what exactly is there that can hold 1 million people?
The closest thing to
Nothing.
that is the Green Party,
and
they're
I
kind
disagree
of
with them too.
They're
I mean,
a joke.
I wouldn't want to join the Green Party. I don't like their platform. I think their leader is stupid. I think their plan is idiotic, and I think that they're like this sort of like the Democratic Party in exile. They're not a political party. They're a bunch of people who can't find a political party that they can in all good conscience join. They're a
miscellaneous category. Yeah.
So joining them is kind of a waste of time too. So then you end up with nothing, and then a bunch of fucking radical assholes will be like, well, I have this revolutionary communist party of a couple dozen people. You should join that, and people inevitably don't, and so then it ends up becoming just as fractured as ever.
Well, that actually brings up an interesting point in the fact that a lot of particularly young Americans have gotten radicalized by this election.
Yeah.
I have seen quite a few pictures. I know that Reddit is not a representation of the, actual society, but a lot of people have Bernie 2016 posters, and then he lost, and right next to that is like a poster of Chairman Mao. And I'm no Maoist, but it does show that a lot of people are young people,
grasping
young left-wing people,
things, yeah.
are grasping for more. Like they've been pushed to the left. They've shown that their whole democratic system is a fucking joke, scam, lie, bullshit, and they're. And also, related to that, you have fascist groups and the alt-right, who I'm just going to refer to as neo-Nazis henceforth, are emboldened a lot by President Trump's victory. And fascists and open, not just alt-right, reactionaries, but open actual, suspenders-wearing neo-Nazis are having open carry rallies in Texas and southern states especially, and as a reaction to that, and this is also happening in Europe, you have anti-fascist groups that are organizing against them, and it looks like fucking like the early 1930s in Germany up in this shit. It's happening.
Well, it is noticeable, and it is certainly captivating as far as the symbolism of it goes. Like as you say, the 1930s, the obvious parallels. And I would actually say, outside of the existence of fascists and Maoists, two extremely radical groups smashing heads against each other, the world situation is itself sort of much more similar to World War II than it was, say, a few years ago, where you have a power, in the case of World War II, it was Britain, but nowadays it's America, a world power that is weaker, and at the very least, you could say, could be defeated on a global scale now in a way that wouldn't really be reasonable to say 10 years ago. And that kind of environment is where world wars happen. And that kind of environment, as you say, is also where extremely radical politics tend to bubble up, and on the left and the right, even. And I mean, in this case, I wouldn't even say left and right, or even neo-Nazi and Maoist, but that people are looking for a radical solution to problems that they think that no conventional solution can solve. And to be perfectly honest, it is often, I would say, really unfortunate, but it is often just accidental which side of that knife they happen to fall onto. Yeah. Like, you can just as easily end up in this one really awful area, or this one area, I would say much less awful, much more, to me at least, politically agreeable area. But realistically, without the political education, without the answers from a party and an organization capable of presenting those answers, people will just be picking the thing that seems most convenient. And if that's neo-Nazism, then that's where they go.
Well, that brings up an interesting point, because one thing that I think is interesting that reminds me of is like a lot of people in the alt-right are, white males in their 20s, just like you and me. And they watched the same cartoons that we did when we were kids. We went to the same public schools. We had, basically more or less the same upbringing. And exactly that you said, that you can fall on one side of the knife's edge as it's almost by chance. The political and economic events that are happening are pushing people to either extreme. And it's just weird to see all these people that had the same upbringing as us turn into such racist fucking scum just really deplorable, putrescent scumbags. Fuck them. And I think what you said about the environment where world wars are, tend to happen is true. If you look at global history over the last 500 years, you had at one point, in the 16th century, the Netherlands were the most powerful hegemonic country. Yeah. And these tend to last about 100 years. The empires rise and they fall. And then the United Kingdom took their place. And then when Great Britain slowly started sinking in economic and political military dominance around the world, there was a world war, just like there was a world war between the Netherlands and the UK. And then we get to the United States. And there's been about 100 years of the United States. And we've gotten to the point where the United States is clearly losing dominance in the world. China is ascending. Russia is more and more aggressive. You have several powder kegs that are just waiting to fucking explode around the world. For example, India and Pakistan, the glaciers there, the threat of the existential threat of nuclear war and the existential threat of environmental catastrophe are converging, where you have, because the glaciers are melting in, India and Pakistan, they're losing their water source, and that's going to exacerbate the military conflicts between them. You also have Japan and China with the fucking islands that they can't agree over who owns. You have the borders between Eastern Europe and Russia that are also heavily militarized. Well, there's all these different points where any fucking thing can set it off. And Donald Trump is the person that is able to fucking make any one of them explode with one tweet. Who fucking knows?
I guess. I will say, though, I think that between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, I actually do believe that Hillary Clinton would be the person who, on the whole, would be more likely to result in a world war of some sort than Trump.
Why do you think that? I know she's a hawk, but...
Well, that's exactly it. Trump is already, whether it's words or whether it's a payoff or whatever the hell you think it is, Trump is perfectly happy to, quote, work with Russia. And his hatred for China is apparently due to some slight they did to him in the 1980s, if anything. But for whatever reason, he really hates China and wants to screw them over through business deals. Now, on the whole, I don't think that that's actually going to work, but even if he goes through with every single thing he wants, all that will do is it will create an environment in which, the business conflicts occur. War probably won't happen because of anything, at least as Trump has stated in his foreign policy. He wants to be friends with Russia. He wants to get out of South Korea and Japan and a bunch of other countries because it's apparently too expensive, even though that's not true. He wants to fight China on a financial level. And beyond that, that's pretty much it. He's a protectionist. He's an isolationist.
No, but what about the people around him? What about all of the extreme right wing and in some cases neo-Nazi people that he's
appointments?
The head of Breitbart is a fucking neo-Nazi scum, and he can fucking eat a bag of 1,000 dicks forever. So, fun fact: Steve Bannon actually, interestingly, considers himself to be a Leninist, and he clearly does not understand what that term means. But
I don't know. Most people don't. That's fine.
Yeah, but
you don't have to.
But anyway, just the fact, his Secretary of Defense is an extreme hawk. He's the kind of guy that's I like to shoot at Arabs in my free time.
Sure.
And I think that Trump is a petulant child man, B, extremely thin-skinned, and C, very easily manipulated. And I think that the fact that he has appointed such extreme right-wing elements of the Republican Party to cabinet positions and positions of influence, and he doesn't understand what the fuck is going on anyway, that they will really be the ones pushing the policy. So to say that, Trump's a protectionist, well... Yeah, maybe, but the people around him aren't. And he's willing to lie and switch positions at the drop of a hat anyway, so how can you even tell?
Well, at the end of the day, we can't. You, me, and anybody cannot really, truly tell what Trump will do. And I think that that's more than anything else what liberals hate and fear about him the most. For my part, all of this ends up coming back to the sort of the economic and political situation of the United States. Not the president of the United States, but the state of capitalism in America. Like, what is the capitalist class of America interested in doing? I don't think they're particularly interested in a world war. And I could say that about the capitalist classes of every major country on Earth. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it won't happen. Just because everybody doesn't want to go to war doesn't mean wars don't occur. But ultimately, if we're talking about the kind of war in which a deal can't be struck ahead of time, like this sense of inevitability, I think, is a bit overblown, and that when it comes to Trump himself, yeah, you're right. I don't have any fucking idea what he's going to do or say. I don't know what he's going to do tomorrow. I don't know what he's going to do on any particular issue. I don't know what he's going to tweet, and I don't know the effect of his tweets. But I think that it's wrong to inflate the importance of that compared to the underlying economic reality of interest.
That's not what I'm doing. I'm just putting them in conjunction with one another, where you have this economic powder keg, you have a geopolitical international powder keg in many different places, and you have an extremely volatile wild card as holding the highest office in the world, and it's just a recipe for disaster. So for any socialist listening to this right now, or any social democrats, anyone on the left, now is the fucking time to organize. God damn it.
And if you're listening to this after the world's been turned into a cinder, then I guess Ben was right and I was mostly wrong. I don't know. It's World War, and World War is one of those things like nuclear war that I think gets thrown around. I mean, obviously, nuclear war has been thrown around a lot more than it has actually happened. And I think that there is a kind of fear-mongering within that distracts from the realities of what we're looking at. Trump is not president for any particular reason. He's not the president because of X, right? Like, there's no one-word answer to why he's the president, and there's no one-word way of describing what his presidency will be like. However, I do think he is certainly indicative of the time period we are in.
Yes.
With the time with what just happened in Italy with their referendum and Brexit and in the United States and the election of the current president of the Philippines, there is a general, although always very close to the line, reaction to neoliberalism and sort of the established order of things in the West. I guess what I'm getting at is just that Trump is, I would say, more symptomatic than anything else. I mean, you can say Trump will try to do things or say things or make, if he's sitting in a room and there's a big fucking red button in front of him, would he press the button? Probably. But ultimately, I think he is more symptomatic than he is will be a cause of any particular thing. He might get blamed for a lot.
Yeah, but that's worse. You're saying that like he's just a symptom. Like, no, he is a fucking symptom. He is a symptom of the greatest economic recession that we've seen since World War II. He is a symptom of the degradation, the falling apart of American liberalism and the status quo. That's what makes it so scary. The fact that, the conditions are set in the world for some sort of conflict. I don't want to call a world war or anything, but that if the historical precedent repeats itself, and it has 3 times already, that's possible. I mean, the only thing that's a deterrent is nuclear holocaust, because nobody really wants that.
Well, and money.
What?
And money. I mean,
I heard you, but
nuclear war. Well, not a nuclear war. A world war between Russia, China, the United States, whoever. Like, pick the major power. If it's not one of these rinky-dink wars in which only a few million people die, we're talking about the absolute biggest kind of war that can be conducted right now.
The absolute biggest war that can be conducted ever.
Well, we'll see. They said that about World War I and II. So, hey, World War III may simply be a precursor to World War IV. We don't know. What I'm saying is that the integration of globalism and global economics and global finance into the world does present a massive break upon any actual interest. Now, the bizarre thing about this is that traditionally, if you were in a slump like America is, or China is moving into, or Russia has been in for quite some time, or Japan, or pick a major country, most of them are in slumps of some sort or another.
Yeah.
The traditional way of resolving this would be through some kind of war. In the case of Japan, you conquer Korea, you turn that into a market, you get a bunch of cheap resources, you sell them a bunch of your manufactured shit, and you make a bunch of money, and your economy starts booming again. America does the same thing with a bunch of countries, Russia, China, whoever. They've all tried, either failed or won or whatever. The irony to globalization and the global financial market is that has, to a great extent, blocked that option. Wars would be occurring right now if not for global financial systems. However, those global financial systems are also blocking the most effective and decisive way for capitalism to get out of its own crisis. Right. Those wars people act like these wars happen because America wants to see dead Iraqis or something. And while, as you say, there are certainly people in Trump's cabinet right now who probably actually would like that, like that one thing, a lot of dead Muslims or whatever. Like, there's a lot of real fucking psychopaths in his cabinet right now.
Yeah.
The actual reason for going to war ends up being a lot more prosaic and based on making money more than anything else. And the problem with the global financial market is that more and more often the actual productive, and I want to use this in big fucking quotes, the way out of the crisis as far as war goes is not a good thing as far as I'm concerned. However, that option is ultimately blocked by the way our global economy works now. Now, that's just a higher bar, and maybe at some point in the future we get above that bar as far as reasons to go to war.
Everyone has a price.
Yeah, there is a point, right? There is a point where people, if leftists do not have a solution ahead of that point, and that bar is quite high still, but if we don't have a solution ahead of time that we can offer and seriously make a case for, yes, eventually a world war will occur. But I don't think that we're anywhere near that point yet. No matter how much Trump might like to sort of talk about how simple it is and how essentially like 19th century he likes to act.
On the other hand, though, I think that as we continue to see climate change spiral out of control faster than anyone has ever predicted that it would go, that this is going to exacerbate the existing contradictions in global politics to a large degree. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's like going up exponentially, the changes in temperature, and it's faster than anyone predicted. And I think that more than anything is going to drive and put a wedge in the real contradictions and issues. Yeah, the conflicts. Yeah. I mean, like I mentioned before, India and Pakistan. And I think though that as far as Trump is concerned, this is a pressure cooker, and Trump is a fucking totally unpredictable. So I'm scared. I think this is bad.
It's a pressure cooker, and Trump is a terrible cook, I guess.
Yes.
I mean, fuck knows what he's going to do. He might blow up the whole thing, or he might just give us something that's half-baked.
And one thing that I think is interesting about Trump, and totally not surprising, is that he's not entirely concerned with being president. Like, he's more
He's a big picture sort of guy.
Sure, that's a real generous way of putting it. But he's happy to be president just for his own fucking resume and his own, fame. And, usually I think he's only gone to 2 security briefings with the CIA so far, whereas Mike Pence is going to 2 every single day.
Yeah.
Mike Pence, I think, will be a more influential person on politics in America than Trump will be. And the people around him, not just Pence, but, as I've mentioned earlier, like all of his cabinet posts are going to have a lot more sway than Trump does, not because Trump is incapable of it, but because he doesn't really care. He's the fucking big cheese now. That's all he fucking cares about. And Mike Pence, he has spent his entire political career, like when he was governor of Indiana, it was really clear that he didn't actually give 2 shits or a fuck about being governor of Indiana. He was using it to further his political career. He was aligning himself with national GOP, extreme right-wing, sort of anti-abortion, anti-democrat, whatever the fuck else things, even though the people of Indiana didn't particularly care about that. And even though that Mike Pence wanted to be president, I think this is an even better opportunity for him, and he knows it, because he can let Donald Trump do all the fucking fancy shit and go to all the meetings and whatever, and he can just silently in the background pull the strings and push him towards anti-abortion, warmongering, hawkish, anti-environment, extreme Republican, right-wing ideological positions. And I think that he will be entirely successful in that. Jesus Christ. I mean, Trump has been trolled into... he has harassed teenagers on Twitter because they slighted him somehow, which also brings up the fact of the union leader that called out Trump's, con on this whole Carrier air conditioning thing.
Yeah.
Where within 30 minutes of him criticizing Trump tweeted at him and said, blah, 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 he's a fraud, blah, blah, whatever. And then what's scarier, I mean, that's like whatever, Trump can say whatever he wants on Twitter. But that union leader started getting death threats and started getting threats against his children and his family because he criticized the president. And this is indicative of the sort of proto-fascist character of the Republican Party as it stands today, where it might not be the actual Republicans that are wearing the armbands and making threats against people, but there are people, the foot soldiers effectively, that are willing to threaten violence against anyone that's critical of him. And this is a really scary development in American politics where the liberal democratic consensus of we can all express our own opinions and have free speech is gone out the window. And I do want to mention the fucking irony of the fact that a lot of people on the alt-right and the neo-Nazi movement are very adamant about free speech and I can say what I want and it's my right to say racist slurs and whatever. But as soon as a union leader criticizes the president, oh no, free speech doesn't count anymore and we have to make death threats against them. Fuck you.
Well, that's those same people will probably, if anyone bothers to ask them, probably denounce whoever it was the most making the death threats. I mean, at the end of the day, they're as easy hypocrites as anyone else. But as far as Mike Pence goes, right, the first thing you said, Mike Pence being the fucking puppet master, or at the very least, the only person in this whole fucking circus that actually followed the traditional way of doing things. You slowly work your way up to a position of power, and you use each of those positions in order to get higher and higher up that ladder.
Right.
That's Mike Pence. Certainly not Donald Trump. Was Hillary Clinton, but Mike Pence is the Hillary Clinton of the Republican Party, let's say. Perhaps he will be a massive influence upon Trump, but once again, I'd say if, this is the problem. For all that you or anyone else can say that Trump is an unreliable, dangerous character, there are people like Pence to, keep him in line. There are people, and by in line, I don't mean doing the right thing. I mean doing the consistently in favor of America thing, doing the smart thing, effectively.
Pence, he's making sure that Trump does the dangerous thing every time.
Maybe. Well, we will have to see. But I would argue that in the case of Pence, he's not someone who is necessarily interested in war. Honestly, if I had to guess, I'd say Pence is probably interested in being president in 8 years.
Or 4.
Or
2.
Yeah, it depends.
Here's the thing.
Or in a couple months.
Yeah, well, Trump could easily get impeached.
Sure.
Because just the fact of his business dealings around the globe.
Yeah. There's I don't know, but there's got to be dozens of fucking nonsense, bullshit, illegal shit he's done. He's a billionaire.
No, it's not. Well, yeah, sure. That's why he hasn't released his tax returns. But even if it's not illegal, just the Constitution of America, and I hate to sound like an American bringing up the Constitution, but does forbid the president from taking, bribes or such and such, whatever, from foreign governments.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that his business, now in a quote-unquote blind trust with his own children, is totally not a blind trust. And, that alone is enough to impeach him. The fact that he has these massive conflict of interest. But the fact of the matter is that the Republicans control the executive branch, the Congress, the Senate, And
Yeah.
if Donald Trump is able to put through a Supreme Court nominee, they will
Which there's no reason he won't be, right? I mean, he will. I'll make this prediction. Of all the things that God knows what Donald Trump will do, Donald Trump will appoint a Republican to the Supreme Court.
Well, yeah, what else would he do?
Well, exactly. Of all the things you could say, like, well, God knows what country Donald Trump will fucking have a snit fit over and declare war on. We have no fucking idea.
Right.
But we do know, as much as we can know anything about Trump.
Sure as shit, he will.
Yeah, he'll appoint
And, well...
Unless he appoints a Democrat for some fucking insane reason.
Well, I think if he appointed a Democrat, it would be because they were a member of his direct family. I think
himself, you mean?
Well...
Wasn't that long ago he was a Democrat.
Yeah, that's true. He's switched sides a couple of times, but...
He's the Manchurian candidate.
Now, I don't want to make any bold predictions, and I do think probably that Donald Trump will be president, but...
Oh, yeah, the votes are still coming in.
No, the Electoral College hasn't voted yet.
Oh, come on. I mean, really? You're gonna even appeal to that fucking decrepit shithole of an institution? You might as well ask the Queen of England to declare war on America in order for Donald Trump not to be president.
Okay, I think you're probably right, but it would take 37 Electoral College voters to vote for someone else other than Trump for him not to get the presidency.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the numbers it would take. I'm saying that, are you seriously going to appeal to what is probably the least democratic, quote, democratic institution in the world today? The Electoral College is evil. It's wrong. It's bad. It's a fucking travesty to anyone who thinks democracy is a good idea.
I agree with you 100%.
So why the fuck would you say, well, there are 37 people who will just change their minds?
Because I think the American democratic system is not particularly democratic or particularly a system.
Yeah, 2.7 million people will agree with you, and counting.
So, yeah, well, that's just it. I mean, Hillary won the popular vote.
Yep.
And I think that also enough time has passed that shows that Donald Trump isn't going to follow through on a lot of the shit that he says, and he's just...
Yeah, you're right.
You know, he's not an anti-establishment candidate. He's just a fucking moron with tiny hands and a Cheetos face, and is just pointing the most extreme right-wing elements of the Republican Party to office.
Well, and some people who aren't even in the Republican Party, they're so right-wing.
Sure. And so I think it's unlikely and it's probably not going to happen, but it's still possible at this point that he could lose the Electoral College vote. I think it's a fucking long shot.
I think that is just delusional. That is just a fucking fever dream nonsense thing that people will say. A, because Hillary Clinton would not accept the presidency at this point.
You don't think so?
Nope. I think that if that were to happen, if 38 people were to say, I'm going to vote for the person who actually won the popular vote, because, you know, I believe that that's the right thing to do, I think she would say no.
I think that Hillary Clinton is enough of a power-hungry politician demagogue that she would say yes, but I don't think that would happen. Because a lot of the people, there's two Electoral College voters from the United States that said they're not going to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
Both of them are voting for, I'm going to give you one guess, and it's not Hillary Clinton.
Is it Jill Stein?
No.
Is it the Libertarian candidate?
He's a Republican.
Fuck, I don't know. Jeb Bush?
Cash.
Oh, right, man. It's been a long time since I heard that name.
So, yeah, I know. And so that brings up an interesting question. Let's just, take a Twilight Zone hypothetical journey down this road.
Yeah, okay, fine.
And let's say that the Electoral College people don't vote for either of them.
Yep.
So that would go to the Supreme Court, right?
I guess.
And the Supreme Court has 8 judges right now, right?
Yeah, sure.
They don't have an odd number, they have an even number. What the fuck would happen then?
You really want my answer? Because I think it's going to be the same answer I've been giving for the last, as far as I've been a socialist. The liberals will capitulate to the conservatives.
Yeah, probably. That's what they're best at.
That's what happens every time this happens.
You know, and one of the things that really has bugged me about not just this election and how easily Hillary Clinton just conceded to Donald Trump without saying anything about we need to fight for our rights or blah, blah, blah. It's the fact that even in the past 8 years of Obama, where he has been constantly making concessions and constantly trying to find a middle ground, and the right wing has shown themselves completely fearless insofar as not following the rules is concerned, insofar as gerrymandering is concerned, cheating, suppressing the vote, doing whatever they can to not play by the rules so they can win. And the liberals, for them, it's like, well, we can't cheat.
The rules.
This is the foundation upon which our society is based. And I'm not saying anyone should cheat. I'm just saying that, you know, liberalism is not consistency, I guess. Liberalism is not equipped to deal with the challenges of this day.
Fair enough. It's worse than that. I mean, even the cheating. I would say that liberals, time and time again, will legitimize cheating, will legitimize an illegitimate process because of their faith in the whole system as a whole. The presidency is this great and lauded thing. America is wonderful. As Hillary Clinton put it so elegantly, you know, America's great because it's good.
I just puked in my mouth a bit, sorry.
In any event, what I think that is sort of part and parcel to is this attitude that America is something worth defending no matter what. And so before Trump became president, he was a joke, he was a scumbag, he was just some fucking asshole off the street. You couldn't have picked a worse person. He was just some regular fucking schlub who should never be anywhere near the fucking, you know, the levers of politics.
Yeah.
But now that he's the president-elect, they're falling over themselves to try to find a way to make him acceptable to themselves. They're trying to kind of go, well, you know, they're on the fucking news now debating the merits of this and that political appointment as if he gives a shit. Like, well, he's picked a right-winger here, so obviously he's going to have to balance it out with someone less right-wing and blah, 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 blah. And they fucking love that shit because that's where they live. That's their whole outlook. It's this notion of give and take, of balance and force, and so on. And when you have someone like Trump, who has now sort of vaulted himself into the highest office, liberals can't deal with that in any other way other than to legitimize him and, quote, work with him, give him a fair break. As Clinton herself said in the concession speech, you know, he deserves an open mind.
That reminds me, liberalism is itself what breeds fundamentalism, because liberalism cannot itself deal with the contradictions that the capitalist economy upon which it is based creates. Right?
Sure.
You just agreed with Slavoj Žižek. Saying.
I agree. Well, you know, a broken clock is right twice a day. In any event, I'm not such a fucking sectarian that I wouldn't agree with a notion, or at least a phrase that I agree with. Liberalism is its own fucked up problem that is it's the tumor of the left. It's this thing that just is there and it doesn't really contribute much useful, but it does take a lot of resources in order to maintain. And it's nice and it's convenient, and this is sort of where the metaphor doesn't matter anymore. What I'm saying is liberalism is convenient. It's a way of sort of avoiding the issues that we actually have to face. It's the status quo. It's the let's have 4 more years of Hillary Clinton. You know, wouldn't that have been nicer? We could just keep working and building and trying to do what we're doing before, but under a much more conducive environment. Whereas with Donald Trump, it's all chaos and God knows what, and war maybe, and that's going to be hard to deal with. And there are arguments on both sides as far as what would be better for the left, and I don't really know, and I honestly don't particularly care at the end of the day. Ultimately, when it comes to if you're talking about like if there was a grade I had to give to liberalism over the previous period, yeah, you're right. It'd be a fucking gigantic fucking F minus.
Yeah.
They fucked up big time. And it's not this year, not last year, not before that, not Obama, not even fucking during Bush, not even during Clinton, just in general, that they have been building this kind of vapid, pointless tendency of let's just hold on to power as long as possible and hold off like a fucking floodgate the evils of the world.
The reason is because liberals think that the system works, right? Like, they think, they have faith in the fact that at the end of the day, we can all just come to some sort of consensus, we can come to some sort of agreement about how things work. And the foundation of liberalism, in and of itself, is blindsided to the inherent contradictions in capitalism, where they don't want to acknowledge those class divisions. They just want to put on a fucking nice smiley face, and we can all agree and come to an agreement, and they ignore the fact that society is fundamentally flawed, that the economy is fundamentally flawed, that there are class divisions, that we can't all agree, that if one group benefits, if one class benefits, another gets fucked over. That is something that liberalism fundamentally cannot grasp or accept. They just view that society is just a bunch of different groups talking amongst themselves, and we find a conclusion after, in our democratic debates and whatnot. Liberalism is incapable of understanding and accepting the fact that there are divergent interests in society, that capitalists fuck over working people, that they do whatever benefits their pocketbooks, they do whatever benefits their wallets. They don't want to accept that because it's a sort of stormy gray cloud in their sunny liberal, ideas. And liberalism, I think, is fundamentally founded in this philosophical view of society, where it's not founded on a materialist observation of how society is actually structured and works. And so when someone like Trump comes along and is talking about we need to save jobs, we need to, make America great again, they don't understand that. For them, that's just nonsense. That's just some crazy fucking right-wing demagogue racist talking a bunch of nonsense. But the fact of the matter is that Trump spoke to working class concerns in a way that Hillary Clinton was totally incapable of doing. And liberals, not just Hillary Clinton, but liberals in general, are totally incapable of communicating to working class people with actual material concerns about what the way forward is, because they're too they abandoned unions and working class people decades ago, and they're more concerned with, we just need a more inclusive society and we need just to be more friendly and cooperate more. Well, I'm sorry, but people don't have gainful employment anymore. People don't have union jobs anymore. There is no economic basis upon which liberalism can survive. It's gone. It's crumbled apart, and it's yesterday. And the fact that Hillary Clinton, even though she won the popular vote by almost 3 million votes at this point, we can blame this more on America's totally non-democratic electoral college system more than we can on maybe everything that we're saying here. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is that the economic contradictions in society have amplified that. These tensions have split open, and the wound is bleeding, and neo-Nazi groups are free to speak their minds and have been appointed to positions in his fucking cabinet, and we have to deal with them now. And I think that liberalism is just not equipped to deal with this at all. Liberalism requires a successful, productive economy. In the 60s and the 70s, we can see that this sort of thing can work when you have a lot of middle-class union jobs where people can put food on the table. But as soon as people can't put food on the table, that brings into question why. And then that allows groups like the neo-Nazis and the alt-right to blame it on immigrants.
I agree with your assessment of liberalism. They're not equipped. They prepared for things that didn't happen or just don't really matter. The general focus on these non-economic relations, the sociological stuff, has led them down a really fucking useless road. However, and this is not me saying liberalism has a lot of great things to offer us, but ultimately I always feel obliged to be a devil's advocate with every fucking little thing.
You don't say.
Yeah. The issue of all those little things, of the sociological side of this, is, I think, what's at issue now with Trump being the president. The fact that liberals generally can't deal with this and are just kind of flailing all over themselves to try to find a nice little pond to live in now doesn't really concern me. I don't really care what happens to liberalism from here on out, to be honest. What does concern me is that the effect that they have left behind on people, on sincere people who are looking at Trump and saying, you know, I fucking have listened to this guy and he sounds like a massive piece of shit. And I think ultimately our goal, and the goal of anyone who gives a fuck about actually defeating Trump, has to be appealing to people in a way that doesn't just say, you know, liberalism was garbage and that's it, right?
Okay, sure, you're right. I mean, the identity politics that liberalism relies on isn't...
Well, stole, I actually think. But,
sure, yeah. Stole. That's not wrong. We do need to stand up for minorities. We do need to include minorities. Every group that is repressed and discriminated against is our fucking ally, and we need to defend to the death their rights to exist. And as you said earlier, we can't have a united working class movement unless we acknowledge those things and take into consideration all of their concerns. So I think, though, like you said before, we all thought that the 2008 economic crisis would be the rallying call for the left movement, where we have to stand up for working people. But an economic crisis is an amorphous thing. But Trump isn't. Trump is a one thing that people can rally behind, and that we can get all of our fucking troops in order and fight him, and fight American capitalism, and fight capitalism in general under a united banner of fuck Trump.
I guess that gets into sort of to where this all leads, right? Trump is now president.
Dare you predict where this all leads?
No, this isn't a prediction. This is more of a question. Trump is president. Clinton is gone, perhaps for 4 years, perhaps forever. We may never know. What do we do now that Trump is a fact of our lives and the lives of every single fucking person on Earth? There are a few people alive today who do not know that Trump is president of the United States. And on the basis of that question, what do you do, is really the central one, at least for some time, until the economy collapses again. Trump is the major focus point for most people's interests. And so that, I think, does become a kind of both a rallying cry for people, but also a question of, you know, do we seriously think we can defeat Trump in an explicit way? Like, is there some power within the next 4 years that can see him out of office before his full term? I don't think so.
Mac, the people are fucking invincible. Okay?
Sure, but
the people are the greatest army. If people can actually unite against a thing and can cooperate, can organize, can mobilize, they can defeat.
To a point, yes.
I'm not talking about in a liberal political sense.
No,
I'm talking about on the streets.
I'm not talking about.
I'm talking about fucking revolution.
Well, if a revolution is the one thing that is required to defeat Donald Trump, I think most people would probably say, "Fuck it, let's see what he can do for at least a little while."
Okay, but how long is a little while?
A couple years, maybe. I mean,
how?
Maybe even a few months.
How much buttfuckery would you give Donald Trump before...
I wouldn't give him fucking anything, but this isn't about me. When we're talking about the people and about revolution, we're not talking about you and me. We're talking about a general environment. We're talking about the sort of thing that generally doesn't happen very often, particularly in the United States or Canada or most Western countries.
This has never happened before in
Well, it's happened a few times.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, if Donald Trump actually decides to make a Muslim registry,
Sure.
if he actually decides to deport 3 million immigrants,
Yep.
do you remember a couple of, I think it was 2011, around then, where there was the Day Without Immigrants movement, where you had a bunch of Latino
That was a mass
people.
movement.
It was huge. Just the fact that that happened a couple of years ago shows that a working class movement in the United States is possible.
Maybe. However, that Day Without Immigrants movement basically failed, at least as far as I'm concerned.
They had more people out than on the streets than almost any other movement.
On the streets is not a revolution. On the streets is a starting point. If you're talking about the state of the presidency of Obama, the fact of the matter is Obama, deported the number of people Trump is merely promising to deport. If you're talking about like results and what will inspire people to move, if Donald Trump were over the next 4 to 8 years deport 3 million people, that is a massive fucking number. But it is apparently not a number that will lead to any kind of overthrow of anything. It might lead to protests, it might lead to a mass march, it might lead to all kinds of interesting things, interesting opportunities, but Trump will probably still be president.
Yeah, and the issue with the United States is that they don't have an organized working class movement. There is no third party.
There's no labor anything.
Yeah,
there.
The labor leadership sold out to the Democrats a long time ago, and they haven't actually, done anything about it since. And that's one thing that I find, insofar as Bernie Sanders is concerned. Bernie Sanders has founded the Our Revolution movement, but it's all within the Democratic Party. He still thinks that the Democratic Party can be reformed from within. And I want to think that he is right. Insofar as entryism is concerned, if there is an organization within the United States that is sort of linked to the working class,
Sure.
that maybe can change, it's the Democratic Party.
Okay, but entryism, I mean, you could make the case, and I wouldn't have agreed with it from the beginning.
They lost. They're fucked. The Democratic Party is in shambles. If there's any other point in history where they could be reformed, it's probably now.
I'm not talking about entryism from the point of view of the actual election. I mean, Bernie Sanders did everything he could to get the Democratic Party elected. And in a sense, maybe that was the best possible result. That Bernie Sanders didn't run against Hillary Clinton, and it didn't split the vote, and it didn't result in, the right-wing liberals going, oh, these fucking socialists fucked us over, and Trump is now president.
Yeah, they're saying that to Jill Stein instead.
Yeah, even though it didn't matter. But when it comes to Bernie Sanders, the issue of, I mean, as I said, maybe it was a good thing he didn't run. I personally, I think it was a good thing he didn't run. However, I don't think he should have endorsed Hillary Clinton. I think that after he lost the Democratic nomination, not that he should have run as a third party, but that he should have built a third party. Not necessarily one that was going to even run in this election. Because, you've got like a fucking few months. You're not going to win. You're not going to build the fucking base you need. But why not say, we're fucking breaking with this fucking two-party bullshit. If in this 2016 election, people vote for Trump or Clinton is really none of our fucking concern. Our goal is to build for 2020, 24, whenever, in the future. I mean, that's my own idealized version of what Bernie Sanders would have done. As it turns out, Bernie Sanders was not the kind of candidate I thought he was. He's a Democrat. For all that he fucking says he's an independent, for all that he says he's a socialist, and for all that I can agree with much of what he says as far as policy goes, he's a Democrat. He'll support the Democratic nomination process, even when he knows it was biased against him and undemocratic.
Yeah, but Bernie Sanders isn't technically a Democrat.
Oh, come on.
No. I agree with you, but the fact of the matter is that I think that Bernie Sanders is looking at politics and like, this is our best option right now. I think that Bernie Sanders should have used this opportunity, and it was a unique historical opportunity to build a basis for a third party in the United States, and he didn't. But I think that when he was faced with Clinton or Trump, he was like, okay, well, we should vote Clinton. And
Well,
I think,
that's what I would say, to be honest.
nevertheless, well, sure, but nevertheless, he did found the Our Revolution movement. It does exist to this day. We don't know how that's actually going to play out. We don't know if that will eventually become a... You disagree with me, Mac?
I completely fucking disagree with you. Our revolution is such a fucking joke at this point. Endorsing Hillary Clinton, he didn't need to endorse her, like, wholeheartedly.
Okay, let's forget all that. Let's focus on
let's
Our
forget
Revolution.
about the last year. Yeah, sure, fine. Done.
No.
Bernie
What do you
Sanders,
think about Our Revolution? What is your opinion on that
I don't think it'll go
movement?
anywhere. I think it'll end up becoming a kind of a siphon for people to go back into the Democratic Party.
So, do you think that the Democratic Party is totally beyond hope?
No, I
kind of do.
Given
but
no other option, it will just be revitalized by the fact that it's there and that it has many dozens and thousands of people who, are establishment candidates or people in it. Are the Democratic Party is an institution, and because there is nothing to really seriously challenge it, it'll just end up taking up the fucking bits and pieces that are available to it.
It'll be the youth wing of the Democratic Party.
It'll be the youth wing of the Republican Party is probably what it'll end up being, if you want to be fucking that myopic. But no, I think it'll just end up being the same Democratic Party it was before. And if it happens to get into power after Trump, it will act the same way it acted under Trump, or as it wanted to act under Clinton.
The only reason that I bring up Our Revolution and Bernie Sanders' political organization that he formed is because where does the working class of the United States actually go at this point? Because the left, and I mean the real left, I don't mean the liberal left, have been lamenting the fact that there is no working class American political party. This has been going on since fucking forever, since the Democrats abandoned the working class. Is it easier to start an entirely new political movement, or is it easier to co-opt the existing framework? Where does the actual left go to achieve their gains in America today?
It is the traditional outlook of leftists, of socialists, that you go to the labor parties, you go to the institutions that, good or bad, better or worse, are the ones that did a thing, or, they represented working people somehow, somewhere, sometime. In the case of the States, there has never really been such a party. They're actually quite unique in that sense. Not accidentally either. And so the question becomes, do you support the Democratic Party? A party that whose interests are thoroughly linked with business and the status quo and everything else? Honestly, I would say no. Given Bernie Sanders, who was certainly not a long shot overall, given what we now know about the way the DNC operated, they're not a party interested in politics, even. They're not a party interested in Bernie Sanders. They're not a party interested in social democracy or labor politics or anything else. On the whole, looking at how he was able to build a movement within the Democratic Party, maybe that was a good thing. Maybe it was fine that he, made his charge inside of an institution that he would never win in. But at the end of the day, if he is unwilling to draw people out of that, then what difference does it make?
I was disappointed when Bernie Sanders, even after all of the shit that the DNC did to him, he still views that the Democratic Party is sort of the way forward for his movement. I want to think that I'm wrong. I want to think that the crushing defeat of the Democrats in this election will sort of push them towards looking to different options. But just the fact that they actually won the popular vote and their ideas are actually more popular than the Republicans might stifle that. But I don't know. I want to remain optimistic and think that the movement that Bernie Sanders started in his candidacy will live on, and that those people that were so crushed that Trump won will be further pushed towards the left and pushed towards becoming activists and going on the streets, doing things to...
Fighting the ascendant fascists, even.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think it would have been better that Bernie Sanders, tried to create a Labour Party on that basis, and I feel kind of sold out that he didn't, that he capitulated to the Democrats and just decided to stay with them, even though throughout his entire career he's been an independent senator and not a Democrat. But nevertheless, I want to see that there are broad swaths of American young people that agree with his message, that want an alternative to the two-party system. Bernie Sanders campaigned as an outsider. He wasn't the traditional candidate. And if the Democrats hadn't have fucking stymied his campaign, he probably would have won. And the media too. For fuck's sake, the media were showing images of Donald Trump's empty stage before he went up to give his speeches, instead of actually showing the rallies of thousands of people that he was speaking to.
Sure.
And they have a role to play in this as well.
Absolutely, they do. Their role was always anti-establishment, whether it was Democrat or Republican.
Anti-establishment?
Sure. You had Bernie Sanders, who was the anti-establishment Democrat. You had Trump, who was the anti-establishment Republican. The media was always happy to make fun of either one of them for their foibles or weaknesses or whatever. They would go out of their way to show them up as weak and irrelevant or whatever.
No, they did that with Trump, but they didn't do that with Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders was lucky to get 10 seconds of airtime on CNN, whereas the media were falling over themselves to even just get a glimpse of Trump, because his sound bites were so attractive in terms of a media standpoint, right?
Sure. I guess what I'm saying is that what the media did in this election and what maybe they'll be doing going forward, ultimately, the media was shown up as the real losers in this election.
And
overall.
The pollsters.
Pollsters, media, but the establishment, quote unquote, whether you were a Bernie Sanders supporter or either a Trump supporter, the establishment lost. The polls lost, but also the media lost in its attitude towards the candidates. And this is something that I kind of almost feel sorry for the Democrats for. The fact that every time the media talked about how respectable Clinton was and how terrible Trump was, it played into Trump's position.
Yeah.
Every single time.
Yeah. Because
the whole point was, and I don't disagree, because I am one of those people, but you can't trust the media. That attitude played into Trump's campaign, because at the end of the day, the Clinton campaign's whole fucking position was, Trump is not one of us. Trump is not a candidate. He's a fucking joke. He's a disgrace to the American political system. He's not even the Republican nominee. He's just some asshole who, by accident, has sort of stumbled his way into this process.
That is kind of true, but let me ask you this. Do you think that Donald Trump is the last belch of the baby boomers' influence on society and politics, or do you think that he is a product of 2016?
I think 2016. Ultimately, the baby boomers will be much like every other generation, be blamed for more and more things as time goes on. For all that you and I can complain about being disenfranchised from the political process because of just the generation we happen to be born in, the fact of the matter is that baby boomers were not given a fucking solid choice either. And in that case, is Donald Trump the baby boomers' choice? I would say no. Honestly, the baby boomers' choice was Clinton. Honestly, baby boomers wanted Clinton.
Baby boomers also favored Trump. It was the young people that wanted a third party. It was the young people that wanted something different, right?
Sure. That gets into the whole fact that we spent this whole fucking time talking about Trump and Clinton and the non-category, the I didn't vote category being the most popular amongst Americans.
Right.
That there is not an option that inspired people to go to a ballot box. I mean, honestly, in any normal circumstance should be enough to fucking tell people what's going on. The fact that these two fucking massive pieces of shit, one who represented the worst things about American fear and racism and depravity and everything, and the other one who I will let you guess who I'm talking about, because God knows you could replace one for the other right now. I mean, who was the champion of fear in this election? Fuck knows. Who was the champion of racism? You might say Donald Trump. I mean, obviously that's the obvious choice. However, Clinton, on the basis of her actual campaign, the manipulation of racial groups by the Democratic Party was disgusting.
Well, I thought you were going to say the anti-African American policies that her husband instituted in the 90s.
I mean, sure, that was in the 90s, and as far as I'm concerned, if you said something in the 90s, it's you can let it go. Obviously, when it comes to certain things Donald Trump has said, that doesn't quite work. But I mean, even taking it as it stands now, it doesn't provide a clear out for anybody. It doesn't provide on the basis of if you look at the Democratic Party, if you look at the Republican Party, it's a fucking disaster. So are you or anyone else really surprised by the fact ultimately that most Americans, the average American, the American thing to do, if we are to pick a thing, the American thing to do was to not vote?
I remember watching a piece that Democracy Now! Did where they were covering the anti-Hillary protests in the wake of Bernie Sanders losing the nomination of the Democratic Party. And there was one woman who was carrying a sign that said "Never Hillary." And Amy Goodman went and talked to her and said, "Why will you never vote for Hillary? Why do you feel so strongly about that?" And she said, "When I was a kid, I had 5 siblings. I had a mother and a father, and we were on social assistance because we weren't able to make ends meet. And then Bill Clinton instituted a law that made it more difficult for people to be eligible for social assistance. And her mother and her father were no longer eligible. So she had 5 siblings, and her mother ended up resorting to prostitution in order to make ends meet because they were no longer eligible for welfare."
Sure.
That's why she said, "Never Hillary. I will not vote for this woman. No matter who she's up against, no matter what the circumstances are, she and her husband fucked my family." And I think that this, on one hand, shows the absolute naked hypocrisy that liberalism is, but also the fact that I'm not surprised that Hillary Clinton lost in this sense. I mean, she did win the popular vote. If they had an actual democratic system, she would have won.
Sure, but let's be fair. The Democratic Party and the Democratic institution, the way the polls were turning throughout the last half of this election were that A, Clinton was going to win no matter what. B, if anything really happened, Trump would win the popular vote, but let's not worry, the Electoral College would block him from the presidency. But I guess what I'm saying is that the Democratic Party was hoping that the Electoral College would protect them, that the establishment system would protect them from someone like Trump. And that is, I guess, what ultimately the Electoral College is supposed to do, The Electoral College has never actually been used in this way. And if there's any time in fucking history that it should be used, it's now. Well, 100 years ago it was used, but I mean but this is, I guess, the thing. There's a lot of talk about Republicans and Democrats, right? They're the two establishment parties, and the fact that it has been a fucking 100 or more years since a Democrat has followed a Democrat. The system is Democrat, Republican, Democrat, Republican.
8 years each.
Yeah, exactly. Well, or whatever. But basically following upon another. A president becomes unliked to the point where the voters generally will bias themselves towards the opponent. That ends up happening in 4 or 8 years. Now, you could say that is what happened now. That Trump is simply the presidential candidate that the Republicans were putting forward, and the fact that there's a Democratic president means that, yeah, of course, people are going to pick a Republican to fucking balance it out, to pick the other option, because, I mean, the last 8 years have not been fucking roses, so why not go with the other guy? And I think this is worth at least addressing, the idea that this is business as usual. Is this business as usual?
You're wrong. It's not.
I don't think it is, but I'm asking you, and I'm asking, I guess, myself to some extent. Is this not what we should have expected based upon the way the American political system works? The Republicans and Democrats, they switch places.
Okay, but whatever the case, I think that now is high tide. It is time for left-wing people in the United States, whether they're social democrats or communists or socialists or Maoists or Trotskyists or whatever the fuck, to unite under the banner of against Trump and to find a fucking solution for the American working class.
I do think that ultimately it does come down to politics. Political education. Unity is a good thing. Unity is great to appeal to, but
you need the winning ideas.
You need the ideas, and let's face it, the left has not taken those on yet. So long as the left doesn't take the winning ideas on, we will continue to lose. And I wish that Donald Trump was our last step on the way to victory, but I honestly think he will just be a road bump. There will be a president in the future that we will look to and wish that he was Donald Trump.
Just in the same way that we wish that Donald Trump was just George Bush.
Sure. Yeah. More of the same, I guess, in that sense.
I don't know. I think you're wrong. I think this does represent a turning point. I think this is the point upon which that the American left will put aside their divisions and at least give an honest college try to uniting against him and building something that maybe resembles a united working class front against this demagogue.
God, I hope so. I hope you're right, and I hope I'm wrong, because what I'm seeing isn't better or worse, but is much of the same. And based upon the way the left has addressed people like Bush and Obama in the past, God, I hope we will do something different with this fucking asshole.